The previous ayah, the last ayah that we stopped last week was concerning the freedom of Yusuf alayhi salam, and him coming out of the prison, right? And we mentioned about how Yusuf alayhi salam, his way of getting out of prison had nothing to do with what he did. Everything that had to deal with Yusuf alayhi salam's freedom had nothing to do with what he did personally, right? And we also mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of everything for him, right? So after that scene, the scholars of the Mufassirin, the scholars of the Tafsir, had mentioned that Yusuf alayhi salam was offered a job position, and the king himself wanted him to be in a position next to him, working alongside with him, right? Thereafter had passed the years of easiness, right? The 7 years in which they had enough. And at this point, ayah number 58, some of the scholars mentions that it is even past 6 years after famine. So from the time that we left off previously until now, this ayah, a total of 13 years has already passed, right? So we can just imagine Yusuf alayhi salam has been in this position of leadership for a very long time already. And the time of difficulty is in effect at this moment, at this point in time, right? So some of the scholars mentioned that at this point in time is already 6 years into the famine or the drought, right? Now, the spread of the drought is more than just the country itself in Egypt. It actually spread out to Philistine, to Palestine, right? And Canaan, where Yusuf alayhi salam was from, right? Therefore, in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that وَجَاءَ إِخْوَةُ يُوسُفَ فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِ فَعَرَفَهُمْ وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. Allah is telling us here that the brothers of Yusuf has come and entered upon his palace, or of Egypt, right? فَدَخَلُوا عَلَيْهِمْ, and they entered they entered upon him. فَعَرَفَهُمْ, Yusuf alayhi salam, at that moment when he saw his brothers, he knew who they were. After all those years, he recognized who his own brothers were, right? Now, if we look into it, the brothers at that time, when Yusuf alayhi salam was thrown into the well, they're already old, right? They're already at their teenage years or whatnot, right? And if you notice that people, they only change when they're at a young age, right? Their facial, their facial hair, their the way they look, it changes a lot while they're young. But after a certain age, like 16, 14, 15, 16, that's it. They don't really change much, right? Once they hit the age of puberty, it's just probably just facial hair, and that's about it, right? For the brothers, they've already reached that age. So Yusuf alayhi salam recognizing his brothers isn't far-fetched, right? Like you can actually recognize their brothers if that's the case. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues and say, وَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ. The brothers, in fact, did not recognize Yusuf. Because why? Remember we said that Yusuf alayhi salam, when he was thrown into the well, he hasn't even reached the age of puberty yet, right? So we can actually imagine that Yusuf alayhi salam changed a lot from the time where they last saw Yusuf until today, right? So So the reason why the brothers of Yusuf had approached and came to Egypt is obviously for help, right? We established that Egypt, Yusuf alayhi salam, has this whole plan set up already. Based off of what? Based off of the dream. He gave advice to the king that the first 7 years of this famine, from now until the famine, we have to save as much as we can, right? Whatever grains that we accumulate, just use just enough so that we can survive. The rest of it, we'll save it. So they're accumulating a lot, right? So much so that, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, and I would argue that Yusuf alayhi salam was so intelligent in matters of policy, in matters of governance, that he set up a system to be able to save as even more than enough, because what do we learn here in this ayah? That people from other countries came to ask for help. They even had enough to supply other countries. This is how Yusuf alayhi salam had it, right? His planning was so great that he didn't even accumulate enough just for his country, but he had more than enough to supply other countries. Do you see? Right? So you have foreign traders, right? Now you have people in the country, and obviously they're more recognized, right? They have the same clothes, they have the same language. You know people from your country because of those things. They look like you, they dress like you, they talk like you. Correct? Now you have other people from other countries, foreigners, who comes into your country, right? For example, in America, you don't treat other foreigners the same as you treat your citizens, right? Your citizens, you have an American passport, class, you enter this. They probably don't even stamp, right? I don't know if do they stamp when you come in? They don't stamp when you come in, but you stamp when you go to other countries, right? Other people from foreign countries, when they come into America, they have to go through, agriculture process. They have to go through screening, and they have to go through all these things, right? They have to fill out paperwork, so that people will come in from other countries. They have to make sure that this person is, we can allow him to come to the country. He's not bringing anything, like dangerous or whatnot, right? Similarly, we can assume that Yusuf alayhi salam, being the person that he is, how intelligent that he is, probably would have done the same, right? Now, another fact that was recognized in this ayah is that the brothers went and actually met Yusuf himself, right? This is not really normal. If you think about like authoritative figures, like I myself, quick story. When I was in Saudi Arabia, students there, we found out that there could be a possibility to request our family, our wives, to come stay with us while we're studying, right? We heard that there was a way to do that. That way was to submit an application and a letter to the prince of the minister during that time in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Riyadh, right? So we did so. My friend and I, Shaykh Al-Zali and I, we were married during that time, and we went to go, we wrote a very extensive letter, and we actually went to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we waited there to apply for our wives to come with us, right? Now, would it be likely that we actually go and meet the minister himself?
I don't think so.
Not really. It's not likely, right? It's not normal for just a random person, especially a foreigner, to go see, like the government or the president himself. It's not likely that that happens. Now in this case, we know that the brothers dakhalu alayhi, they actually entered his premises, right? His office, so to speak, right? And they're face to face because Yusuf alayhi salam recognized his brothers. So he's seeing his brothers right in front of his face. It's not normal for that to happen, Does that make sense? Right? So in this case, there's an opinion that mentions that the reason why they actually met Yusuf alayhi salam is because they were foreigners. Yusuf alayhi salam had a system in reverse, that he wants to make sure his job was so important to him. Remember we talked about ihsan, to perfect your job? He himself wanted to screen the people that are not from his country, to make sure that he himself goes through that process and clears them, to make sure that they get what they're asking for and nothing else. Do you see the difference here? Right? So obviously this is all speculation. It's not, it's not from Allah's words or whatnot. But Allah leaves things ambiguous for us to kind of to think about during our time and during that time as well, to kind of make connections, right? If we don't have this type of like missing details, the connection between our reading and the Quran won't be as solid. So you can kind of imagine when things are left out, it makes a person eager to want to learn the truth, right? And this is just another reason why Allah does this. It's for us to figure out and try to understand the Quran in a deeper format. So not only that, another reason is that the brothers, obviously how many brothers there were? Shaykh Habib? 10 brothers, right? Now, if you had 10 families coming to request some kind of trade, you're gonna be like, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot to ask for. So you're gonna be like, nah, you know what? Let me check them out first, right? So the amounts that they're asking for is kind of like, you have to go through a certain type of process to do that. So it continues to say, فَعَرَفَهُمْ فَهُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرِينَ. We explained this, that the brothers, they had a different type of dress style, right? We know that the father of Yusuf alayhi salam, Yaqub, he wasn't wealthy. He came from a very poor area. So obviously they didn't wear the same type of clothing that the Egyptians wore. Different appearances, different languages, right? So they were clearly different from the people of Egypt. So based off of that information, we can see that Yusuf alayhi salam, he started to question them. He started to question where they're from, who they were, why they're here, what's their intentions. And through that process of questioning, they came to reveal that they actually had another brother. They had another brother that didn't come with them, right? So with that process, Yusuf alayhi salam, obviously he knew, but he did it in a way where the brothers didn't know that he knew. Does that make sense? Yusuf alayhi salam here is being discreet. Now, one lesson that we can take from this is that Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't reveal himself to his brothers at that moment. Right? He didn't say, oh, my brothers, I'm Yusuf. Don't you guys recognize me? He didn't say that. He had his guards up. Right? Does that make sense? Now, there's a saying in Islam, right? Actually, the kuffar, they like the saying so much that they call it an Arabic proverb or an Arabic saying, right? But it's actually a hadith from the Prophet Muhammad Samael. But they liked it so much they don't want to associate. They say, oh, it's an Arabic saying, and they would say this, right? So the saying says, لا يلدغ المؤمن من الحجر واحد مرتين. So the saying is that a believer will never be bitten by the same hole twice. You know those the snakes in the desert? The snakes actually live underground. They barrel a hole and they stay underground. Why? Because it's so hot. So they need a place of shelter. Right? So people from the desert, they know that if they see holes, they can differentiate between snake holes and other holes, right? So those who, in this case, the Prophet Muhammad is saying that a true believer will never be bitten by the same hole twice. What does that mean? It means that as Muslims, we're not naive. We're taught to be intelligent. We're told to be people of Iqra, people who actually study and read, right? People of intelligence. We don't get tricked. And even, wallahi, even if it's from our own family members, unfortunately, it's usually the case that our own family members are the ones who bites us the first time, if that makes sense, right? As a true mu'min, we don't get bitten, or we're not naive to fall for the same trick twice. So in this case, Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't reveal himself. Why? Because of what happened in the past. As a true mu'min, you would have your guards up and try to make sure that, I'm gonna see if I can test them first, to see if they change and they return back to they repent to Allah, and they're not, what's the word? They're not influenced by shaitan anymore. Because remember, the lesson from the past where Yaqub alayhi salam taught us and taught Yusuf alayhi salam was that who's the one that is truly to blame for the wrong that they did? Shaitan. Not the brothers. That's the true lesson then. But still, they are still, I'm looking for that word. They are still affected by shaitan's waswas, their whispers. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he was not naive. He still had his guards up, and he wanted to make sure that if he can trust them or not. Right? That's probably the biggest lesson in this ayah. Right? Now, the next ayah, وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ قَالَ ائْتُونِي بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ أَلَا تَرَوْنَ أَنِّي أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ وَأَنَا خَيْرَ الْمُنْزِلِينَ. Now, bear with me with this ayah, because I mentioned before that whenever Yusuf alayhi salam speaks, there is so many lessons that we can extract it from. Now this is just one sentence. So, this is one sentence. Let's see how many lessons we can just extract from this one sentence from Yusuf alayhi salam. Bismillah. So, a little bit of a backstory before we get into this ayah. The brothers, they came with things to trade to receive grains and food from Egypt, right? So they came with things from their country, or from where they're from, so that they can trade it for food, so they can bring it back, because they don't have food at home, right? Now, the deal was that they will trade and they will switch. This is how they did business. Is that they had clothing or jewelry or whatever that they had from their country that doesn't exist in Egypt. So when people in Egypt sees this new things, when you go to different countries, what do you usually get from different countries? What do you call them? Souvenirs. What do you get souvenirs for? Because you don't have it in your country. It's unique, right? It's unique, and you can only get it from that place. Now, back then, they would bring those stuff to the central area of marketing. and they would sell and trade for those things, right? And then because of that, they can raise the price because they know that people will buy it. Now we're getting into business here, but I don't want to get too much into business. However, that's kind of the backstory. So they're requesting supplies with what they have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the next ayah, وَلَمَّا جَهَّزَهُمْ بِجَهَازِهِمْ. When Yusuf alayhi salam prepared their things, when he was preparing their stuff, right? This is actually a technique in business we can even use today. When he was preparing their things, he says to them, قَالَ أُتُونِي بِأَخٍ لَكُمْ مِنْ أَبِيكُمْ. Do you see me preparing your things? Next time, come with your brother from your father. Come next time with your brother from your father. أَلَا تَرَوْنِي إِنِّي أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ وَأَنَا خَيْرُ الْمُنْزِلِينَ. He says, don't you see that I am I give you enough provisions, right? Don't you see that I give you the amount that we're how did you say it? Don't you see that I give you the amount that you're asking for, right? The amount in which is good. Like I'm not like when you're doing trade, some people will take like it's not a fair trade. Does that make sense? In this case, Yusuf alayhi salam is saying, I'm more than fair to you. Don't you see that? Right? This is everything that I'm preparing for you. Don't you see that it's more than fair that I'm giving you? And he says, Ufil Kail, right? So he says, Wa ana khayrul munzilin. The last part is evidence that some of the scholars mentioned that while the brothers were there and he accepted them, they actually stayed there for a few nights, right? So that Yusuf alayhi salam, you know what? He says, you guys traveled from far away. Remember all those questions that he asked for? He says, you guys are from Palestine? Wow, that's a long way to come from, right? In fact, why don't you stay for a few nights? Stay for a few nights. I will host you. I will feed you. I will give you a hotel, maybe 5-star, because he's the king. He can do whatever he wants. Well, not the king, but if that makes sense, right? 5-star hotel, I'll give you the best food, lounging, everything. I'll take care of you for a few nights so that you can replenish, rest, so that you can get ready for the next journey back home. Now, the evidence here is used for the last word. What's the last word? وَأَنَا خَيْرٌ مُنْزِلِينَ. What does munzilin mean? Munzilin comes from the word manzil. Now, what does manzil mean? If we say manzala or manzil in Arabic, it actually means home. All right? Now, there's another word for home actually. Does anybody know? Bayt, mashallah. Bayt. Bayt is a place where it's just, your home. Manzil is a place where you find tranquility. Hospitality. Is a place where you feel like you're at home. Al-Bayt is just a place where you go to sleep, and obviously it's a house, but it means something different when you say manzil. You find peace there. When you go back after a long day at work, you go home, what do? You see your children, your eyes, fill up with love. You go home to your bed where it's relaxed. You see your wife, she's already prepared food for you. Does that make sense? Like, this is manzil. So when Yusuf alayhi salam is speaking here, he's saying, Ana khayrul munzilin. I am actually the best of hosts. I take care of you. Don't you see that? Right? Now, so the method in which he's using here, Yusuf alayhi salam, this is actually a business method. For those of you who knows business, trust, it is the number one thing that will have your customers coming back to you, is trust. If your customers don't trust you, you won't have a lot of sales, right? For example, there is a known businessman. I'm still debating on whether if I should mention his name or not, because his name is actually really is known in social media today, and people are kind of like, on both sides when it comes to this person. However, he gave an advice, a sales advice, and he says that what I do, I sell like partnerships or stocks or like, he's the middle person between a buyer and a seller. He's the middle person to connect those two people, right? What he says to his customers is that he convinces customers to buy certain things. So the customers that he have will give him money so that he can use that money to invest or buy for that customer. Does that make sense? Right, a broker, okay? Now this is what he does. Every single customer that he has, he calls them back and he tells them, he says, listen, right now is not a good time. Maybe the season is not, or whatever, or like, the stocks or the whatever you want to buy is not just a good season right now. So let me refund your money, all of your money, and I'll refund it to you, and I'll call you when. Now they studied between the year 1987 until 2012, and they asked different types of questions, right? They asked different types of questions to different types of people all over the world, to different types of countries. And they listed the top qualities of leadership, okay? Of leadership. Now, the number one word that keeps reappearing every single time from different countries, from different timelines, different years, and different types of people. Okay? Now this is a very big, vast, like a very big spectrum. Okay? It's not just like one community and then they only have one idea, and then, when you talk about different ideas and they all say the same thing, it tells you that that's the most important thing around the world, correct? The number one word that keeps reappearing is integrity and credibility. Integrity and credibility. So these two authors, they wrote another book just on credibility, that one word. And they wanted to explain what does it mean by credibility, and how do we get that characteristic to be a leader. That one word, we need it to be a leader, correct? You know what they said in that book? They defined the definition of credibility. You know what they said? They said that definition is being trustful and trustworthy. Trustful and trustworthy. Who recognizes those words? Those are the same exact words that the people of Quraysh said about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They said that he was a sadiqul amin. A sadiqul amin. Amazing. So when we say the best leader, wallahi, if everyone around the world says that whoever is a sadiqul amin is the best leader, wallahi is true. Because it's the exact same word that we describe the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Trustworthy and truthful. Right? So let's go back to the story. Yusuf alayhi salam. What did he do for his brothers? He housed them. Khairul munzidin. He gave them a fair amount. And not just more than, honestly, in my opinion, I think it's more than what they're asking for. Because people from a poor country, they don't have much, right? And when they want to sell for grains and stuff like that, they're not going to get much back. But as a person in leadership, Yusuf alayhi salam, he would definitely take care of those who because why does he want this position for? Why did he say, he said, I want this position for what? Hafidun alim. Because I can take care of it. I can be the best at this position. Right? And we know that he cared for the people more than himself. Because he said he'd rather stay in prison and give the answer to the dream. Right? It shows you what type of person he was. So when people come from asking for help, obviously he's going to give. Right? Now, some people may ask, how did Yusuf alayhi salam come to know about the brother? And wouldn't it be suspicious? Wouldn't it be suspicious for him to say, you come back with that brother from your father. Come back with him. Wouldn't it be suspicious? They're like, why does he want a brother? What's the reason? There has to be a reason behind it. Does that make sense? Yusuf alayhi salam. Now this, in my argument, wallahu ta'ala a'lam, this argument here proves the genius, the geniusness and the intelligence of Yusuf alayhi salam. He is able to make people do what he wants them to do without them being suspicious. Does that make sense? He's able to make people do what he wants them to do without them being suspicious of him. And this is what he doesn't want this. He doesn't want them to be suspicious of him, even in the slightest, right? So he uses these techniques to convince the brothers to come back the second time. Without being suspicious. So how do you do that? You make them want to come back by themselves. If they choose to come back by themselves, then in their mind, they're like, I'm the one that wants to go back. He doesn't want me to come back. And then if I come back next time, I'll bring my brother also. Does that make sense? Right? So the second reason how Yusuf alayhi salam is able to convince them is that, obviously during a time of prices being inflated, right? People are in need. Like even during our time, right? Right now we're seeing prices going up. Like gas prices are like almost $5 now. Tomatoes are like $9 a sack. It's crazy. SubhanAllah, right? And then for us, we're like, man, I wish I can find another store that's cheaper. And if it's cheaper, wouldn't you go to that store? Obviously. Now in this case, the prices that Yusuf alayhi salam has beats everyone else. So wouldn't the brothers want to come back anyways? Even if it took them to travel from Palestine to Egypt. They would do it. Because they know that they'll get a good deal. Right? So because of that second reason also, they themselves choose to go back without even knowing that Yusuf wants them to come back. Right? Now I'm saying all this because there's something after, like a few ayahs afterwards, that I believe, in my opinion, is that it shows the true meaning of ta'wil al-ahadith. Remember we explained what ta'wil al-ahadith is? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught Yusuf. Now, this goes back to my argument. When somebody is very learned, right? Somebody has a lot of knowledge, correct? You can kind of see it by the way they speak and all that, right? Now, their knowledge comes from years of studies. A lot of teachers, scholars even. But who is more knowledgeable than all of the scholars put together? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah says that يُعَلِّمُهُ تَأْوِيلَ الْحَدِيثِ, when Allah is your teacher, how smart do you think you'll be? It's my goal to prove that today, inshallah. Okay? أَلَا تَرَوْنَ أَنِّي أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ وَأَنَا خَيْرُ الْمُنْزِلِينَ. Do you not see me that I am the best of, like أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ is like, so أُوفِي comes from the word wafa, meaning to satisfy or fulfill. Does that make sense? So when you say أُوفِي الْكَيْلَ, I satisfy our trade. I fulfill it, right? Like you're satisfied with it, I'm satisfied with it, right? So that's one part of the ayah. And then he says, وَأَنَا خَيْرُ الْمُنْزِلِينَ, I am the best of hosts. I take care of you, right? So when we think about it, you know how like hotels or even like airlines, for example, hotels and airlines, their business is completely about customer satisfaction. To satisfy your customers as best as you can, and to satisfy your customers more than your neighboring hotel. Correct? So what do? They think about like complimentary drinks, for example. Right? We have the best snacks. We have the best seats. It's wide. You have a lot of leg room. Right? This is what they do to convince their customers to come back to them. Is that true? Right? Hotels, for example, they have the plushest pillows, for example, or they have the I don't know, like the best view, or is right next to the theme parks or the beaches. This is what they do to compete with other hotels, right? Now, in the case of Yusuf alayhi salam, wallahi, nobody can beat him. Nobody can beat his prices. Nobody can beat his hospitality, right? So just because of that, anybody will go back to Yusuf. Isn't that true? And wouldn't you want to bring more of your family to go back to get more? Right? You'll bring your family to go get more because it's like free stuff. Right? Now ayah number 60. فَإِن لَمْ تَأْتُونِي بِهِ فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي وَلَا تَقْرَبُونَ. Now everything that we just explained about Yusuf alayhi salam being hospitable, having the best prices, right? Yusuf alayhi salam used another tactic to try to convince them to come back. Now, Yusuf alayhi salam says, فَلَا كَيْلَ لَكُمْ عِنْدِي. He says, you will never find, or you won't have a measure with me. You won't have the trade with me, nor will you come close to me again. Does that make sense? He says, if you do not come back with your brother, you won't find business with me again. And you won't come close. Like you won't even come back to Egypt. Right? Or another another explanation is that you won't have this type of hospitality with me. You can come back, but you're going to have to go through the process like everyone else. Right? You won't have that with me. You won't come close to me. لا تقربون. Right? Now, what is this? What does this say? The tactic that he's using right now, he gives them an incentive. Like he gives them some. Do you guys know do you understand what incentive means? Yusuf alayhi salam is giving something to them so they want to come back. Right? Like for example, if I give you this water, Sharahabil, and I say this is the best water you've ever tasted. All right, this is better than Zamzam maybe. Right? And you drink it and you're like, man, that's the best water. And I tell you, like, if you don't come back next week to my class, I won't give you another one. In fact, you won't even come close to me. Right? This water is the incentive. to make you come back. Does that make sense? Right? Now, Yusuf alayhi salam now, his incentive is what? His hospitality and his prices. Right? Anybody would want to come back for that. But now he's saying, he's giving them a warning now. Now he has an incentive and now he has a warning. Both of these together, a customer will do whatever it takes to come back. Correct? Wallahi, the best sales advice ever. It's so amazing. Now, he says, the warning is, he says, if you don't come back with your brother, you won't have a measure with me. You won't have this business with me anymore. In fact, you won't even come close to me. Because of this, you feel the urgency. Every single one of those brothers will be like, they look at each other, man, we have to come back. We have to, and we have to come back with Binyamin. We have to. It doesn't matter what it takes, we have to come back so that we can get another deal from this king. This is the best king I've ever seen. He has the best prices. He is the nicest king I've ever known. We have to come back so that we can create this connection, this relationship with him, so that we can come back for more and more and more. And remember, this is the 6th year of the drought. And they probably don't know how long it will be. Do you understand? They're like, man, it's been 6 years. When are we ever going to find help? And when they actually find help now, they're going to be like, we have to come back. What about this drought will last another 6 years? So do you see the sense of urgency here? The brother said, I don't care, whatever it takes. Even if we have to do haram maybe. I don't know. Right? Astaghfirullah. They didn't erase that. They didn't say that in the Quran. So forget that I said that, okay? Now, all of this, wallahi, in my opinion, is proof that Yusuf alayhi salam was probably one of the best leaders. And he was the best policy maker. And he was the best at governance. He is the perfect person for this position. Perfect person for this position. And remember what Allah said when He said about Yusuf alayhi salam? He was chosen for what Allah planned for him. Yusuf alayhi salam was chosen for what? For this. Do you see? Who better in that time is better to be the leader than Yusuf? Nobody. Not even the ministers. Not even the king himself. Do you understand? Okay. Ayah number 61. Can you read that? Ayah number 61 until the end of the page.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قالوا سنراود عنه أباه وإنا لفاعلون وقال لفتيانه جعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون.
Okay. Now, you'll notice that I take a lot of time when it comes to the speech of Yusuf alayhi salam. Whenever he speaks, I become so amazed by his words. So bear with me again. This is when he speaks again. Yusuf alayhi salam. Muhammad, you okay?
Yeah.
You look tired. Yusuf alayhi salam says, قال لفتيانه اجعلوا بضاعتهم في رحالهم. لعلهم يعرفونها إذا انقلبوا إلى أهلهم لعلهم يرجعون. Yusuf alayhi salam says, Yusuf alayhi salam ordered his servant, right? Now he has servants, right? Yusuf alayhi salam ordered his servants to return their items back to them. The items that they used to do the trade for the food, Yusuf alayhi salam ordered his servants to put it back in their saddles or in their caravan, right? So without them knowing. Otherwise, he'll just give it back to them themselves. So why would he ask a servant to do it for them, right? It suggests that he did it behind their backs without them maybe knowing. And then, afterwards, it proves that he actually did it behind their backs without them knowing. So they took their items that they traded. So now the brothers has the food and they also have their things back. So it's 1,000% profit, right? Or is it 200%, right? 100% is when you trade. 200% is when you have everything. Is that right? I don't know. So he returned his things. He says, put the money back into their bags or their items so that they can find it when they return back to their families. So perhaps when they return back to their families and they find it, they will come back. Yarji'un. Isn't that strange? Like, why would their items would make them come back? To me, wallahi, when I was reading this, I was very confused. Very confused. I was like, Yusuf alayhi salam already showed hospitality. He already gave them a very good deal. Because of those two reasons, they will come back anyways. But why is it that Yusuf alayhi salam saying to his servants that if they see their stuff, the stuff that they brought with, if they see that it would make them come back? I will try to explain. I'll try my best to explain what that means, inshallah. Now, I just want to reiterate that actually, no, I have so many notes, so forgive me. I have, let's see. Okay, so reasons why Yusuf alayhi salam did that. The number one reason why is to convince them to return back again. To return back again, okay? And also to return back with Binyamin. The goal for Yusuf alayhi salam was what? His goal was to bring his brother to him. Do you understand? What does this mean? It also tells us that Yusuf alayhi salam, even after such a long time, his love for Binyamin was still there. He still loved his brother. Not that he didn't love the other brothers, but he's skeptical of those other brothers. However, his younger brother, right? I know you guys might know this. If you have a younger brother, I don't know if you fight with your brothers or not, but if you have a younger brother, or even a younger sister, being an older brother or sister, you have this protection over them, right? You feel like you're responsible. That better be true? No. Right? Wallahi, even if you guys fight all the time, I promise you guys this. If you guys fight, when something happens, like, a'udhu billah, let's say just, something happens to your parents, for example, immediately, just because you guys are brothers, you guys will protect each other even if you guys hate each other. Do you understand? That love will always be there even if you guys fight all the time. Okay? And I'll give you guys an example. What's happening in Turkey today, or even in Palestine today, right? Parents are dying every single day. Leaving who? leaving their children, who is the one that always takes responsibility? The eldest child. Then anybody, so that eldest child, the next day, immediately when the parents die, rahimahumullah, they immediately will, something like changes in their brain, and they start cooking for their baby brother or sister. They start finding clothes to cover them. They would even take off their own clothes to give to their brothers and sisters. Do you understand? Because why? Allah put something in the elders because we feel a sense of protection to the younger sibling. Does that make sense? So even if you guys fight, trust that the love is there. So ignore all of the annoying things that your brothers do or your sisters do. Ignore it for the sake of Allah, and try to find love for your brothers and sisters. Work on it right now, because if shaitan gets between you guys, it's just going to be like Yusuf and his brothers. Do you understand? You don't want that. Does that make sense? So another thing Allah is putting here is that Allah is putting an example between relationship between brothers that is bad and relationship between brothers that is good. Do you see? Is a balance in the story is wallahi is amazing. We see a lot of balances and parallels in the story that you know, it gives us a lot of lessons to learn from. Okay? So 2 reasons, or 3 reasons total, to convince him to come back with their brother, number 1. Number 2 is that he knows that his family is poor. He knows it. And even if he doesn't know, even if it's just a random person, and you know how he questions them, and they say like, you know, I'm poor, I only have like $2,000 in my bank account, and I cannot survive in Seattle. You know? For that person, for example, like you know what EBT is, or like government assistance. Government will give poor people money so they can survive, right? The poorer you are, the more money that they give you. The more children that you have, the more money they will give you. And in this case, this is pretty much the same thing, right? That you give them back their things because you know they come from a poor country. The food won't be enough for them. They can use their things and sell it in their country so they can get more money to help them, right? Another thing is that the journey back to Palestine, right? The journey back to Palestine, I actually researched it. The trip by just walking takes about almost a week. Continuous walking, not even, you don't rest at nighttime. So 1 week times 2 if you're resting at nighttime. 2 weeks if you're resting, right? And what if someone gets injured and you have to stay a little longer, and who knows what's gonna happen? Maybe you visit a friend for 2-3 days, you know, I don't know, you know, just saying. It takes about almost 1 to 2 weeks depending on the travel. 1 to 2 weeks when you're walking, that's a long time. So that journey, he's preparing them for that journey back home. Okay? Now, let's see. Okay. So this goes into my argument. And I'm not saying that I'm a scholar. I'm not saying that my opinion is better than other people's opinion. This is completely my opinion. And I ask Allah if it's wrong to correct me, and if it's correct, that it's just it's knowledge from Allah. In my opinion, Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, is that the words of Yusuf alayhi salam goes back to the teaching of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He says, وَيُعَلِّمُكَ مِن تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. Yusuf alayhi salam, if you can imagine, the brothers come, they stay for a few nights, right? Yusuf alayhi salam comes up with a plan. This plan is to bring Binyamin to him and also bring his father to him. Okay? This is my argument, is that Yusuf alayhi salam had to come up with a very explicit and very detailed plan to make sure that he convinces the brothers to bring Yusuf back to Egypt without them even knowing that he's doing that. Does that make sense? Right? So he doesn't want the brothers to be suspicious. Like, why does this person want to see our brother? If they get suspicious, even in the slightest, it's going to ruin his plan. Because if the brothers knew the plan of Yusuf, if they were able to figure it out, and they'd be like, you know what? The only person that knows our brother is Yusuf. Does that mean that he's... Wait a second. If they find out that he's Yusuf, they can be like, no way. No way.